If these 5 guys step up in 2026, the Packers will win the Super Bowl. Stick around to find out who they are. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Sounds Gouda. My name is Jordan Olson, and I am your host for today's episode. As always, thank you to any new and returning listeners. Really appreciate you being here and really appreciate your support of the show. Just remember, we have new episodes every Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Buzzers. Make sure you become a public subscriber. That way you can get in the raffle to win one of our Sounds Gouda hats. We're going to be running that promo through our first 1,000 subs. And also make sure to comment, like, chat, all of the above on our YouTube channel. If you're checking this out on Spotify, make sure to follow us. All of that helps the channel immensely, and we definitely appreciate it. So before we get to the main topic of today's episode, which is the 5 players who must have big 2026 seasons for the Packers to reach the promised land and win the Super Bowl, got to talk about a little Packers news that popped up here on Monday. So the Packers extended Isaiah McDuffie. Not going to spend a lot of time talking about this because in the grand scheme of things, pretty small news, but they did give him a 1-year extension worth about $4.85 million on top of the contract that he had for this season. So that locks McDuffie up through the 2027 season. He's got a chance to earn $8.8 million over the next 2 seasons and about $1 million available in playtime incentives. So that's via Jeremy Fowler of ESPN. What does that do for the Packers? McDuffie's obviously a sure tackler who's great against the run, gives the Packers a reliable third linebacker for the next 2 seasons, maybe a little bit of an insurance plan if they want to move on from Zaire Franklin, or potentially if Tyron Hopper just becomes a big fat goose egg and you basically have to wash that draft and develop prospect. So not a bad move overall, low key, but sometimes it's those moves on the fringes that make a big difference in the end. Getting into our main topic, so I'm going to go through a list of 5 players who I believe must have a big 2026 season in order for the Packers to be successful. A couple things that I will state out of the gate so you understand the context of this episode and me recording it. This conversation is prefaced with the fact that there would be no regression from regular stars or key contributors like Jordan Love, Xavier McKinney, Evan Williams, etc. All of those players must be as good or better than they were in 2025. So if you have regression, if you have injury, take this whole episode and throw it out the window. There's also plenty of other players coming back from injury-filled seasons, some of which had season-ending injuries. Tucker Kraft, Micah Parsons, Zach Tom, Devontae Wyatt. Jaden Reed didn't really play a lot last year, so I'm not putting those guys on the list. Those are more comeback players who we expect them to be key contributors. So those guys are not on this list for those reasons. I have higher expectations for those guys as active contributors or borderline stars or star players. This list is all made up of guys who need to take the next step in order to fill out this roster and for the Packers to have the success they're looking to have. One other thing is not talking about rookies. We're really talking about positions where additions were made that should obviously lead to better play. For example, Chris McClellan, if he had a monster year as a rookie, the defensive line would obviously be better. Not going to put that kind of pressure on a rookie to perform like that. Also didn't really look at the cornerback room. I think that they added Benjamin St-Juste. They drafted Brandon Cisse. I think the floor of that room got a whole lot higher with those 2 additions, and even some incremental improvement there, I think will lead to a lot more consistent success in 2026. So we're primarily looking at returning players who have been thrust into starting roles or who are now going to be key players on this team in the role that they will play. So all that said, number 1 on my list is Jordan Morgan. So Jordan Morgan is taking over as the starting left tackle. Rasheed Walker is no longer a Green Bay Packer, and Rasheed Walker was not that good in 2025, making the offensive line a consistent problem. When we look at Jordan Morgan, a lot of talk about him last year being really good at tackle in the preseason. Then you go ahead and you move him over to guard, and he had some pretty up and down, even ineffective results as he moved him over into that guard position. So he did earn a 59.0 overall PFF grade in 25. If you know anything about PFF grades, a 60.0 is what they consider to be a league average starter. So he's not far off of what is considered to be a league average starter. He was 48th out of 81 qualified offensive guards with that grade. He played 748 offensive snaps, which he played basically a full complement of snaps. Somewhere between 800 and 1,000 is considered a full season there. As a pass blocker, he had a 64.3 grade, 31st amongst 85 qualified guards, and his run blocking was a little bit below average, a 57.8 grade, so 49th out of 81 qualified people at that position. He also allowed 24 pressures in pass protection, including 4 sacks and 2 QB hits. He was flagged for 5 penalties over the course of the season. So as you can see, there's definitely some opportunity for improvement. And if Jordan Morgan is going to be the blindside protector of Jordan Love, we need him to be better than league average. And in those areas that he fell short of league average as a starter, he's got to bring himself up to that baseline of league average for this team to have success. The cost of Jordan Morgan being bad will have a monumental impact on this entire season. It's probably the difference between this offense being a top 5 or 6 unit versus just simply being a top 15 unit and being a very average offense this coming season. Additionally, the cost of Jordan Morgan being a flop this season will have implications well beyond the 2026 seasons. With no 2027 first round pick, they really can't go out and just try to fix that with a surefire player in next year's draft. They would need to invest one of their second or third round picks to take a shot at improving the offensive line. And with a second or third round pick, you're really counting on somebody who probably needs development in year 1 to be an active contributor as a starter. Sure, you might get lucky. You might find an Elton Jenkins or a Zach Tom level player, but you might find yourself another Jordan Morgan who maybe will take 3 or 4 years to develop and find his home. And then this also compounds the ability to move on from anybody else that is subpar on the offensive line. So if Aaron Banks and Jordan Morgan are bad this upcoming season, you got to find 2 replacement level players, not just 1. So all that being said, Jordan Morgan, number 1 on my list. He needs to really elevate his play, show that he is a capable starter at left tackle, does not need to be a Pro Bowl level player, but needs to be one of the top 15 left tackles in the NFL this coming season, and just really not be a detriment out there, whether it's giving up pressures, sacks, or committing costly penalties. Number 2 on this list, and this name shouldn't surprise you. In fact, as I was introducing the show, you're probably wondering not if, but where on this list this player would be. Probably felt the same about Jordan Morgan, but Lukas Van Ness is number 2 on my list. So LVN will become a full-time starter in 2026. Rashawn Gary and Kingsley Enagbare are gone. That's 1,121 snaps that need to be replaced, plus Parsons, who will miss the first 5 to 6 weeks of the season. So that is a gaping hole of snap coverage and production that now needs to be made up. And that's going to fall squarely, well, not squarely, but a lot of that weight is going to fall on the shoulders of LVN. So, and LVN only played 263 snaps in 2025. So basically for him to get up to that Gary Parsons level, you're talking about him playing 650, 700 plus snaps right there alone. He's got to almost triple his workload to help shoulder this gap. So when LVN did play, he was pretty good in 2025, although he has a lot more work to be consistent as a down-to-down player in this league. So he earned a 75.5 overall PFF grade. That was 27th amongst 115 qualified edge players. He had a pass rush grade of 68.5, which is 46th out of that group, and a run defense grade of 72.1, which is 20th. So you can see in his limited snap count that he brought some pretty good stuff. I mean, if you can just take that and project that over 700 snaps and come out with some of those same quality grades, that would go a long way right there. And this Packers defense being pretty good to start off the 2026 season. But with that play, he only generated 23 total pressures, 2 sacks, and 14 hurries. So you take that, you project that out. You need to project that out over 700 snaps. And if he could give you that same level of production, that would be 57 pressures and 6 sacks. That would be a good starting place. However, in comparison, Parsons had 79 pressures, 14 sacks, and his 707 snaps last year. So even getting the 57 pressures and 6 sacks would be a long ways away from reproducing any star level production with the absence of Micah Parsons early in the season. So as you can see, we need LVN to take a monumental step. And if you add up all that, you increase LVN's snap count to 650, 700 plus snaps. That still leaves you with 650 to 700 snaps that you need to make up. So when we could say, hey, Jordan, not that big a deal. I believe in Colin Oliver, Barron Sorrell, DDS. One of those guys will step up. Maybe both of them will. If LVN's not up to the billing, well, those guys, Sorrell, Oliver, DDS, Cox Jr., they're going to need to rotate and make up those other 650 to 700 snaps and be productive. So that puts even more pressure on LVN to be on the field and be productive while he's on the field. Without a step forward, this Packers pass rush will be really hurting in weeks 1 through 6 and probably be pretty pedestrian throughout the entirety of the season when Micah Parsons is not on the field. So LVN, number 2 on this list of guys who need to have a big season in 2026 in order for the Packers to win the division and ultimately hunt a Super Bowl. All right, number 3, Anthony Belton. Anthony Belton is picking up where he left off as the Packers starting right guard. At least that's what we think right now before we go into training camp. And this conversation is going to be very similar to Jordan Morgan. Improvement is needed to ensure that this is a top 10 or better offense in 2026. So what happened last year? He earned a 47.7 overall PFF grade, which is far below average. It's been pretty well noted that Anthony Belton got thrust into that right guard role without really having any time there in minicamp, OTAs, training camp. So kind of unfair to thrust a guy who had been a starting caliber tackle all through his college career, all through training camp, into a guard position and say, hey, go ahead and thrive. But we did see some really bright spots from Anthony Belton. We also saw some spots where we were clearly like, that's a rookie who's trying to figure it out. His pass blocking grade will definitely need to improve. 43.3 overall rating, which was 73rd out of 81 qualifying offensive guards. That's just flat out bad. His run blocking, even though we all say, hey, he's a road grader, he's a really good run blocker, there's a need for improvement there as well. With 51.9 grade, 66 out of 81 qualifying players at that position. Hopefully with time to settle in this entire offseason, learning the intricacies of guard, the consistency of the offensive line 1 through 5 there in terms of starters, hopefully that will all equate to Anthony Belton being a league average player at that position. And why my expectations for Jordan Morgan are that we find him to be a above or slightly above average starter. I just really need Anthony Belton to be a league average starter and not be a gaping hole or detriment to this offensive line. And if that's the case, I think that this offensive line can be pretty solid going into this upcoming year. With Belton, there is some insurance if he flops. Jager Burton, Sean Ryan, Jacob Monk, they obviously all could potentially move over, in the case of Sean Ryan, move from center over there. Maybe Jager Burton plays center. But that's going to create a lot of moving pieces for your offensive line in the middle of the season. That may not be necessary. It's probably going to happen due to injury at some point in time anyways. But certainly if everybody's healthy and you're just making a move due to bad play, that is not ideal. So with that being said, Anthony Belton needs to have a big season and is number 3 on this list. Sticking with the offense, Matthew Golden is next on this list. So taking over as a fixture in this offense without Romeo Doubs and Dontavian Wicks, Matthew Golden's play in 2026 will certainly be a focus of the offense and a focus of us fans. So he only played 286 snaps last year as a first-round selection. Obviously, there was a tremendous amount of hype for him coming into the season. He looked great in training camp. The media was really gassing him up, teammates and coaches. All that being said, his stat total for the season on those 286 snaps, 29 receptions on 40 targets, 361 yards, 12.4 yards per catch average, had a 46-yard long reception. That was his longest play from scrimmage, 0 touchdowns on the year. And I think I remembered that at the end of last season. I was disappointed, but when I looked at this stat line again and I was reminded that our first round selection with so much hype coming into the season ended up with a big fat goose egg for touchdowns on the season. I think that there's a lot of room for improvement there, and there's certainly going to be the opportunity. So Doubs and Wicks' absence alone equates to about 701 vacant snaps. We know that some of that's going to be distributed to Kraft. We know that some of that's going to be distributed to Watson. So their target share can increase, but Matthew Golden certainly is going to have the opportunity to nearly double his snap count. I expect his snap count to be in the range of what Doubs had last year, which was about 450 snaps. So you should see a substantial increase, which should nearly double his target share. So he had 40 targets in 2025. I expect him to have closer to 75 or 80 targets. Really, with getting rid of Doubs and Wicks, that's going to consolidate your targets, hopefully funnel them into 4 guys, those key 4 guys being Kraft, Watson, Reed, and Golden, and we're going to put the ball in their hands and we're going to see what they can do. So the Packers also have a history of wide receivers really popping in their second or third year. I believe in Matthew Golden and think he can do it, and this Packers offense will be a lot more potent if he's able to be that guy. Last guy on this list, Aaron Banks. So if you're doing the math, 3 out of 5 guys on this list are on the offensive line. And I've been pretty well documented to say that the offensive line is my biggest area of concern going into the season. This list will definitely reflect that. Big boom or bust capabilities here, right? These guys are either going to rise up and this offensive line is going to be good or great, or if 1 or 2 of them are bad and we have some big issues, we could see another tough year of Jordan Love having to try to do a little too much when he has to, the running game being a little pedestrian when you need to salt away the game. So we'll see. All that being said, Aaron Banks has to be better in 26. He did have injury-riddled 25 and 24 seasons. Last year, he earned a 53.5 overall PFF grade. That was 64th amongst 81 qualifying offensive guards. Played 746 snaps. His pass block grade, according to PFF, was a 52 point. And his run blocking grade, a 54.6. Both of those below the 60.0 league average threshold. So Aaron Banks is making a lot of money. He's being paid to be what's considered much better than a league average starter. His performance and play needs to match that contract. Packers kind of doubled down and even put a little bit more money into the back end of his contract by restructuring it, pretty much guaranteeing him a spot on the team this season and next season. So we just really need to hope that the play of Aaron Banks improves. Again, I expect a little bit more out of Jordan Morgan, but if our 2 guards for this upcoming season can at least elevate their play to be league average, this offensive line is going to be in a much better place. So if all 3 improve, the Packers offensive line should be a top 5 group. If even one improves substantially, the Packers offensive line will be in better shape than it was last year. And when I say one of the 3, counting Jordan Morgan as a replacement for Rasheed Walker's play. All right, a couple of honorable mentions, a couple guys that I considered as we wrap this up. Javon Hargrave, obviously, he could be considered on this list. Defensive line is kind of an area where I do have some questions. I considered him having him on this list over Banks. However, I feel like Hargrave's floor is higher than Banks, and the defensive line could be an issue if McClellan and him are not up to the billing. I think that he's a vet that's going to at least be a league average player. I think he's got the potential to have some impact plays and some games. So I just wanted to put it out there that Hargrave, if he has a big season, the Packers will see the results of that. Two other guys, Marshawn Lloyd, obviously we hope that we just see him on the field. I didn't put him on this list because right now that is curbed by the fact that Josh Jacobs, we're counting on him playing in 2026. If there were no Josh Jacobs in this equation, Marshawn Lloyd would be much, much higher on this list, maybe even the number one player on this list. And then Edgerrin Cooper, again, he didn't really make the cut because I expect a lot more out of him based on what we saw from him as a rookie in 2024. I think he has the makings of what could be a star player. And this is also somewhat insulated by adding Zaire Franklin, helping out that off-ball linebacker group. So that's all I got, Packers fans. More great Packers content every Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Thanks for listening. Please make sure to share this with your family, friends, and other Packers fans. If you're watching on YouTube, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. As always, comment, let us know what you're thinking. Who would be on your top 5 list for the Packers to reach their goals this upcoming season? You can connect with me on X. I'm at Olson Jord. Rob's at Sounds Gouda with 3 A's, and Kalani is at KJones_IN_CO. Until next time, Packers Nation, have a Gouda morning, a Gouda afternoon, and a Gouda night. Go Pack Go.